Today, I am going to give the final talk in my series on the two truths. And I am getting much of the information from a transcript by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche that I have an old version of it, and it's titled A Teaching on the Heart Sutra. The present version of it, it's the same transcript, but the title is Teaching on Emptiness and Interdependence. And I have gone over quite a bit. I think I've given at least 3 previous talks on this. And I'm going to finish today with talking about form is emptiness, emptiness is form, and so on, the Heart Sutra, and kind of tie the whole thing together, hopefully. But I want to go back and very briefly go over the 5 skandhas. And so the 5 skandhas are form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness. And form refers to the physical. Frequently, it refers to our body, but it also, by extension, refers to the objects that our 5 senses can sense. So we have 5 senses, and we have 5 objects of the senses. And so in the Tibetan tradition, form includes these objects of the senses. But the senses, of course, are attached to our physical body. And so form refers to our entire physical body, and then the objects of our senses. And then sensing or feeling is that we either get a feeling of comfort and happiness, pain and suffering, or neutrality, that we get these through these 5 senses. And then perception is that being aware of what we are sensing and then reacting to them. And I'm keeping this simple. Then formation gets more complicated than that. It is, we have memories, we have ignorance, we've got patterns, mind, body patterns, habits. We have virtuous thoughts, spiritual thoughts, angry thoughts, and so on. In the Tibetan Buddhism, there's a list of 51 of these states of mind. And then the last one is consciousness. And this is the ability to know beyond what we see, to find ultimate meaning, the ultimate source or essence of what we see. This is if we are really looking deeply into what we are experiencing in the first 4. But the point being that these are all interrelated, interdependent. They are not separate experiences, separate entities. So now I am going to get into what Rinpoche was talking about. He starts out by quoting from the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Form is nothing other than emptiness, and emptiness is nothing other than form. So this is the first skandha. To continue, that's a quote from a translation of the Heart Sutra. Again, having read Thich Nhat Hanh's translation, they are obviously 2 different versions, of the Heart Sutra, and there's significantly more in the Tibetan version of the Heart Sutra. But to continue quoting from Khenpo Rinpoche's transcript, the interdependence of all things is their emptiness, and the emptiness of all things is their interdependence of their arising, presence, and cessation. So to flesh that out a little bit, because of interdependence, there is impermanence. And because things change, they have no inherent reality. This is what is being expressed here by these lines here. So the unity of appearance and emptiness, or the unity of experience and emptiness, these are the final or ultimate thoughts of the Buddha from the point of view of Sutra and Tantra. Now, I went online and I found a copy of the translation of the Tibetan version of the Heart Sutra. And this is what they have translated into English. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Now, here is Thich Nhat Hanh's translation. This body itself is emptiness, and emptiness itself is this body. This body is not other than emptiness, and emptiness is not other than this body. The same is true of feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. That is why emptiness, body, feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness are not separate entities. Now, in the Tibetan version, it goes on to say, no sound, no taste, no form, nor tactile sensation, no eyes, no ears, and so forth. And what this is getting at is everything is being explained as having no inherent existence. There's no arisal, because arising has no inherent existence. Things arise because of causes and conditions, interdependence. And if there's no arising, there can be no abiding and no cessation. So none of this has inherent existence. There is a way to explain this. Sometimes the idea of the net of Indra, and I do not know this for sure, but I'm speculating that this comes from Hinduism, as Indra is one of the gods in Hinduism. But the idea of this net of Indra is that everything that we experience is like knots of a net. That the net itself, everything is interconnected. There is nothing that is separate from the net. So you still have the knots, but they are not separate, they're interdependent. And so saying that these experiences are emptiness and emptiness are these experiences does not mean that these experiences are don't appear, that we don't experience them. It doesn't mean that there is something that is separate from or superior to ordinary experience. It also doesn't mean that that we are free from karma and that our actions don't matter. This is a common misunderstanding of the explanation in the Heart Sutra of emptiness. So Rinpoche says that actually emptiness is relatively easy to understand, that the hard part is understanding interdependence, and that's more important. And especially the unity of interdependence and emptiness. His advice is that we have to spend more time studying, contemplating, to understand this unity and actually experience it directly. Because quite honestly, the Heart Sutra and all the other teachings on emptiness are merely the finger pointing at the moon, that they are totally conceptual. And as he goes through the Heart Sutra, he says that all of these have no inherent existence, that their nature is emptiness. So eventually we have to experience it directly to really understand emptiness and interdependence. So to go on with the Heart Sutra, it talks about the path and fruition too. And the path has no inherent existence, but on the other hand, it consists of the two accumulations, the accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. So even though there is no path and no one traveling the path, we still travel the path. The accumulation of merit is conceptual, and it consists of engaging in virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind. And wisdom is non-conceptual. We accumulate wisdom when we recognize that the merit we accumulate has no inherent existence. And when the path is seen to lack inherent existence. There is a Tibetan story which kind of gets at this. And it's about a boy in Tibet in one part of their house, and he's with his mother, and he tells his mother, I want to see Dad. And she says, well, we're going to have to go on a journey. It's going to take a long time to walk far enough to get to see your dad. And so this happens when they are in the kitchen. And so they pack some provisions in their Tibetan version of knapsacks, leave the back door and go hiking, walking in Tibet, up and down the mountains, through high passes, And eventually they come to this one pass, and then down in the valley is this house, and the mother tells the boy, your father's in that house. And the boy gets very excited because this has been a long trip. A journey might even be a better appropriate word to use. And so they go in the front door, and there is the father. The boy runs up to him, and the father picks him up and gives him a big hug. And they're so happy. And so then the mom says, well, let's go into the kitchen and fix some tea for Dad. And they go into the kitchen, and it's the same kitchen that they left from. And the path is a bit like that. We travel it, yet in a way it has no inherent existence. And when we reach the fruition, we realize we haven't gone anywhere. So the fruition of understanding the unity of emptiness and interdependence is the fruition of the two bodies of the Buddha, sometimes called the three bodies of the Buddha. The first is when it's two bodies, it's the formless body and the form body. And the formless body is the Dharmakaya, called, quote, the body of essential qualities. So this is the full, complete, direct realization of emptiness, and with all the qualities manifesting. And nobody else is aware of the Dharmakaya except the being that has realized it. It is formless, so it cannot be perceived directly. It's also said that one attains the Dharmakaya for one's own benefit, since no one else is aware of it. But from the Dharmakaya then radiates the form bodies, bodies that can be experienced by other beings. It's a bit like the sun and the rays of the sun. You have the sun, and then you have the rays. We are aware of the sun by its rays. That is what we experience. And so these form bodies naturally radiate or emanate from the Dharmakaya. And the Sambhogakaya is called the body of complete enjoyment. And this is the body that we visualize in our deity practices. The Sambhogakaya is made out of light, and a highly realized being can actually experience the Sambhogakaya and receive teachings from the Sambhogakaya. Tibetan Buddhism is full of stories about great practitioners receiving teachings directly from various Sambhogakaya deities. And then the other form body is the Nirmanakaya. It's the emanation body, and it is defined this way in Rinpoche's transcript on page 27: the unimpeded and interdependent appearance which automatically is present in the experience of beings other than Buddha as a result of that Buddha's Dharmakaya. So I'm going to repeat that here one more time. The unimpeded and interdependent appearance which automatically is present in the experience of beings other than Buddha as a result of that Buddha's Dharmakaya. So Rinpoche compares this to the reflection of the moon in a bowl of water. Both of these form bodies. But again, it's only highly realized beings that can see or experience the Sambhogakaya. Now, Rinpoche goes on to compare Sutrayana and Vajrayana. And he makes this distinction. And of course, this is from the Tibetan perspective. Sutra is based on the unity of appearance and emptiness, and Vajrayana is based on the same. However, in practice, in our deity practice, we look at it sequentially, that when we are doing a deity practice, the first thing we do as we're generating visualization is dissolve everything into emptiness. And again, this does not make appearances disappear, but then we generate the visualization of the deity, and various things happen after we generate the visualization of the deity. And then we get to the third stage, which is dissolving everything back into emptiness, which is done usually after the mantra repetition or shortly after that. The important point here is that the image of the deity is mental. It arises from emptiness, and it has no inherent existence. It is only a mental image. It is the display of emptiness, Rinpoche says. And just to prove that, you can visualize anything. You can visualize any size. You can visualize any amount if you're talented. And our thoughts are not real. So these visualizations are not real. So these visualizations, they're made out of light. They have no substance. And these visualizations are actually a meditation on emptiness. So we divide up these deity practices into the generation stage and the completion stage. And the completion stage is when we dissolve everything and then rest the best we can in a state of non-thought. And in doing so, if we are able to do that, even if it's for an instant, this is the recognition of the ultimate nature. This also transcends any false ideas or apprehensions we have about inherent existence of the generation stage of the visualizations involving the deity. And the third, again, if this is done and we have this ability of resting in this state of non-thought, all elaborations of inherent existence are gone. Here is a quote from Khenpo Karta Rinpoche that takes the next step, and that is about misunderstanding emptiness and interdependence. Quote, if you mistake emptiness to be a negation of experience and interdependence, a negation of the validity of causation and results of actions and causes, that incorrect view of emptiness will lead you to think there is nothing, that there is no need for moral responsibility, and it will bring about your own ruin. So we have to avoid thinking that emptiness is just a negation, that this is what would be called wrong view. On the other hand, the reason why we do deity meditation, chanting, and so forth is that that state of completion, you have this instant where it is possible to recognize the ultimate nature of mind, even if it's for a fraction of a second. So Rinpoche says that if a person is stuck on inherent existence, that they can only benefit themselves, that we really have to understand interdependence and the fact that things do not inherently exist. I said I would talk about the weather. And so the weather is constantly changing. But there isn't a beginning or an ending. If it's a sunny day, well, it could cloud up and rain. Maybe the sun will set. But where is the difference between night and day? Where is the dividing line? Scientists can give you a dividing line, but it's really not a dividing line. It's merely this change of the sun gradually going down behind the horizon, and then it getting darker and darker and darker. And then a number of hours later, it starts getting lighter and lighter and lighter. That there is no end point to a thunderstorm. It's just a transition, and so on and so forth. That this is the way our experience is. Again, going back to this net of Indra. So it is important. The Heart Sutra is a Mahayana teaching, and Vajrayana is included in Mahayana. It is, you might say, a branch of Mahayana. So Rinpoche sums up this teaching in this transcript with a few things. And then after that, I want to go over and read these two different versions of the Heart Sutra. And then I'll open it up to question and answers. But Rinpoche says that we really have to avoid thinking that because of emptiness, nothing exists, and it really doesn't matter what we do because there is no inherent existence. What we have to do is we have to be really careful in our conduct. We have to be really mindful and attentive to what's going on in our minds and what we are doing with our bodies. He uses the word real mindfulness. He says that today people have very high views, but pay no attention to their conduct and no attention to interdependence. And that is a huge problem. He makes an example of this. He says, don't be like a child who's running around chasing birds while their mother is at home trying to feed them. Eat the food that you are given, meaning the teachings and practices that he has given and other lamas have given. He says, make use of the instructions that you are given and follow the example of these great teachers. And the result is a profound view and join with excellent conduct. And he says there are four main aspects of the Kagyu path, being one, the cultivation of devotion to these great teachers. And devotion means wanting to be like the great teachers. The second point is that the teachers have sacred outlook. And that means to see all beings as, you might say, the deity, but confused, but see their ultimate nature as the deity as an enlightened being, and see the environment as ultimately being pure. Then the third point is the cultivation of compassion for all sentient beings. And the fourth is a preservation of moral conduct. So he is talking here about the actual direct realization of the view, direct realization of emptiness and form, form and emptiness, emptiness and interdependence, many different ways to say it. And he says, if we don't apply ourselves diligently and regularly, that knowing the Heart Sutra will just make us more jaded over the years. It will make us think that, oh, I know this already. I don't need to hear it again. I don't, da, 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 da. And you end up being a total imposter and knowing really nothing. So we have to go through the process, he says. So now I'm going to read these two different Heart Sutras. And again, one is from the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, which is Mahayana, and he is a Zen teacher. Avalokiteshvara, while practicing deeply with the insight that brings us to the other shore, suddenly discovered that all of the five skandhas are equally empty. With this realization, he overcame all ill being. Listen, Shariputra, this body itself is emptiness, and emptiness itself is this body. This body is not other than emptiness, and emptiness is not other than this body. The same is true of feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all phenomena bear the mark of emptiness. Their true nature is the nature of no birth, no death, no being, no non-being, no defilement, no purity, no increasing, no decreasing. That is why in emptiness, body, feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness are not separate self-entities. The 18 realms of phenomena, which are the 6 sense organs, the 6 sense objects, And the six consciousnesses are also not separate self-entities. The 12 links of interdependent arising and their extinction are also not separate self-entities. Ill-being, the causes of ill-being, the end of ill-being, the path, insight, and attainment are also not separate self-entities. Whoever can see this no longer needs anything to attain. Bodhisattvas who practice the insight that brings us to the other shore see no more obstacles in their mind. And because there are no more obstacles in their mind, they can overcome all fear, destroy all wrong perception, and realize perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future, by practicing the insight that brings us to the other shore, are all capable of attaining authentic and perfect enlightenment. Therefore, Shariputra, it should be known that the insight that brings us to the other shore is the great mantra, the most illuminating mantra, the highest mantra, a mantra beyond compare, the true wisdom that has the power to put an end to all kinds of suffering. Therefore, let us proclaim the mantra to praise the insight that brings us to the other shore. Gate, gate, para samgate, bodhi soha. Now, this next version comes from the Nalanda Translation Committee. And the most recent translation of this version was done in 1980. And this was supervised by Chogyam Trungpa. And at the end of it, there is an explanation of the source that it comes from Vimala Mitra. And then there is this lineage of who it was passed on through, then got to the Tibetans and translated and so on. So there is an explanation of the source of this. So it is titled The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus I have heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called, quote, profound illumination, end quote. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajna Paramita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajna Paramita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajna Paramita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness is also form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Listen, Shariputra, this body itself is emptiness, and emptiness itself is this body. This body is not other than emptiness, and emptiness is not other than this body. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. there are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu, up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of prajna paramita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times, by means of prajna paramita, fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of prajna paramita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as true, since there is no deception. The prajna paramita mantra is said this way: Om Gate Gate Para Gate Parasam Gate Bodhi Svaha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound prajna paramita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound prajna paramita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, Asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. The question is about karma. If the mind is interdependent, actions are interdependent, how can we have a karma and actually, you might say, things ripen and happen to us that we don't like? Gampopa said, as an introduction, he said, well, my view is as vast as the sky. My attention to karma is as fine as grains of sampa, which is ground barley. The point is that the consequences, the karmic consequences of our actions have no inherent existence either, but we believe them to be real. Thich Nhat Hanh used the example of the monk that went to his teacher and talked about emptiness, da 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 da. And so the teacher grabbed a hold of his nose and twisted it until the monk screamed and said, "Oh, it's empty, is it?" That as long as we don't have the direct experience of emptiness, we think that what we experience is real, especially the painful stuff. Again, I've used this example. If your body has no existence, then go out on I-94 which has no existence, and there's cars that have no existence. And a non-existent car will hit your non-existent body. You will have a non-existent death and experience a lot of pain before you get to the death part. So until you realize at a very deep level this interdependence, that we think that it's real, and it's something that you can't unthink. And that's the problem, is that people get, oh, I've got it, I understand it, no problem. So in answer to his response, it is that, yes, this is beyond concept. And there's only one way to really understand it, is that the direct experience, again, the example of the moon and the finger pointing at the moon, that all the teachings are just the finger pointing at the moon. And we have to actually look at where these teachings are leading us and have direct experience, because we can't talk ourselves into understanding it. And when we develop a little bit of intellectual understanding and you start thinking, well, I've got it, I don't need to know anything more, that's when you become jaded and start going in the wrong direction. The question is, do we have to have a direct experience of interdependence to understand it, meaning emptiness and interdependence? And we can contemplate interdependence. This is something that it's really good to do, an intellectual contemplation. Here is an example that I have used before, and that is, let's say you go have a spaghetti dinner. And what could be more Italian than that? Well, first of all, you're probably eating on a porcelain plate, which was invented in China. I Googled noodles, and they immediately I found a news article that they found a 5,000-year-old bowl of noodles in China. Noodles aren't Italian, they're Chinese. Tomato sauce. Tomatoes come from Peru. It's a New World food. The Romans didn't eat spaghetti. And the recipe that you're using most likely is a very Americanized version of a Italian spaghetti recipe. And then if you look at all the people that had something to do with preparing the plate that you ate on, grew the wheat for the noodles, processed it, produced the noodles, transported it to people at the grocery store, everybody that had anything to do with getting that in the grocery store, and then you buying it. And for every other ingredient on there, that where does it end and where does it begin? And so this is the point of interdependence. If we look closely at anything that we do, any possession that we have, and there is this link of one thing after another, after another, after another, and to think there's a beginning or an ending. When you inhale the air, at what point does it quit being the air and becomes you? And when you exhale, at what point does it become not you and it becomes the air again? The same thing for water, but then that example, gets a little bit gross. And the same thing for the spaghetti. It's like we draw these artificial lines about this is me, this is not me, beginning and ending. And so it's good to do just a contemplation. You could call it mindfulness, just paying attention to what's going on around you and the interconnections. And that's, again, as you say, there's a book of Karmapa called Interconnected, and it's the same as interdependence.